Previously on Maplestory the novel, Sacred Tears.
You used me? You fated me to become what I am today?
There was no other that came before you.
The Aurora crystals. I never imagined that he would give them away so freely.
How are there things that you are not allowed to know?
At least from this point on, there will be no further damage inflicted.
And now the continuation of Chapter 8, Part 3. The blue-eyed being watched them both as the green-eyed being materialized, hiding within the densely packed brush.
That man has something to destroy us!
The blue-eyed being growled.
Didn't we play a trick on them with a snake?
The green-eyed being asked.
Yes, but Guaru stopped us before we could do more.
So why don't you simply go and kill them, rather than playing a trick on them?
A third voice asked. The beings turned to see a large shadow loom over them, its large violet eyes narrow and slanted in rage.
What would be the fun in that? They wouldn't squirm or squeal anymore. And that's the best part.
The green-eyed being answered. The violet-eyed being snarled, about to move forward when something made it shrink back.
What's the matter? You too scared to do anything?
The blue-eyed being sneered.
Something there is dangerous.
The violet-eyed being growled.
Yeah, I know. It's that rod he has. It feels dangerous, but almost like being, happy.
The green-eyed being answered. The three of them shrank back when those they watched turned towards them, watching where they were.
Dane? Is something wrong?
The woman asked. The man shook his head before turning around and walking away.
It was nothing. Let's return home.
The man said as they turned to leave. All three beings released the tension in their forms, looking to one another.
It's almost like that man knows where we are. Didn't he do that once before?
The green-eyed being squeaked.
Yeah, it's like he could see us! It had to be something you did because I was silent the whole time.
The blue-eyed being retorted. The violet-eyed being turned and left, searching out another target for its rage as the other two bickered. It was, after all, their fault. It was all their fault. They were the ones that drove him to drink. They were the ones that wanted him to die. They were the ones that took him away. And they would pay. The violet-eyed being wandered for some time until it came to a path. This path looked well-worn. Yes, this would be the perfect spot for one of them to come and pay for what they had done. The being lay in wait, crouching down within the ever-darkening forest as evening set in. It didn't take long for three of them to come. Three people responsible for driving him to wash his blood away with liquor. As the being waited, the laughter of the nearing humans intensified its rage. What did they have to be so happy about? Were they congratulating one another on their deed being completed? The being waited another few moments as they passed, before silently seeping from the forest behind them, rising high in the air and extending the aura of its body into claws. The being raked its claws down the side of a tree, tearing the thick bark from the trunk loudly enough to make the humans turn back to him with fear-riddled eyes. The being bared its fangs as violet light glowed from its mouth. These humans knew what they had done, and they knew they were guilty. The three humans turned to run, screaming something about a monster. The being gave chase, pouncing on the first one and silencing her screams before she had a chance. The second was just as easily defeated. The third fell down, backing away on the ground until he was against a tree, unable to run. The violet-eyed being watched him for a moment, waiting until their eyes met before lunging in.
It's the 11th attack like this. I haven't the slightest idea what could be causing it, and it's only getting worse,
the cleric bemoaned. Dane had been visited by 5 bishops, each of them having sought him out in hopes that he, the White Mage, might have an answer. Dane heard of recent attacks by creatures made of shadow. He had even defeated a few malformed ones in the past. Up until now, they were limited to the destruction of buildings at the worst. Now, people were being killed by these creatures in brutal, vengeful manners.
We can't defeat these creatures on our own, but you can,
a second bishop stated.
Fartrees, your faith in me is flattering, but I'm only one man. I can't fight off these creatures and search for a cure simultaneously,
Dane answered apologetically.
Then teach us. Teach us what you do and allow us to help you,
a third younger bishop pleaded. Dane looked back to his shining rod next to Ephenia, sitting on their bed. He might be able to share the power of the Aurora crystals, but none of these clerics had ever fallen in love, a part of the clerical code. The one caveat which would be the death of these bishops if they didn't abandon it.
White Mage, will you teach us? As such, we would be better equipped to help the people of Usoria.
Dane thought about it long and hard. It wasn't that he was trying to keep his research a secret. He simply didn't know how to teach them.
I must be honest with all of you. There is only one thing I can share with you. To use it properly, however, you will need to break your oath as a bishop. You must be able to love someone.
All 5 fell silent. Being a bishop of their deity had been their life's work. They would never marry, as their work often kept them traveling, and the road was no place for a family.
If that is the biggest sacrifice we must make to keep Usoria safe, then I say it is a small price to pay,
the youngest of the bishops said. Dane smiled and looked at him when he heard the enthusiastic proclamation.
And what is your name, Fartree?
Dane asked with a smirk.
Viren, Master White Mage.
Dane looked to the others as they gave their names as well. James, Pharamond, Xenos, and Mars. Mars looked to be the oldest and was the most reluctant to give up on his oath. But when weighing it against the stakes he was presented with, he agreed that it would be a small price to pay. Once Dane was sure they understood what the task was they would be taking on, and that it may mean even more tremendous sacrifices, he took them all to a smithy to make 5 more shining rods. While they waited, Dane studied the crystals and found a way to split off small shards of the master crystals to grow new ones. At the same time, he taught the others the basics of light and how to harness it properly.
So, this is the shining rod. A magnificent piece of craftsmanship, I must say,
Mars marveled, swinging his rod this way and that, watching the light dance from the crystals as it spun.
Now, these rods will allow you to harness and amplify the light you carry to fend off these creatures of shadow. You all exude outward light, the best weapon against darkness. But if you are able to harness this rod's true power and vanquish these creatures, you must love someone who possesses the same outward light.
And what if we fail in that venture? Xenos asked. Dane smiled and put a hand on his shoulder.
You won't fail. That is something that must happen naturally. It may take a week, it may take years. I will teach you how to sense hues of light to find outward light more easily. Until then, let's go and make sure these shadows are dealt with,
he said with conviction. As they turned to leave, Viren stopped.
What should we call ourselves since we've abandoned our clerical creed? I doubt any of the temples will take us in now.
The other 4 stopped and thought. They hadn't considered what would happen once they had chosen this path. They could no longer call on the temples they used to serve for their afforded supplies and comforts. Dane nodded, thinking for a moment before answering.
We are clerics of the Order of Aurora.
Mars and Xenos immediately latched onto the name, agreeing that such a title was rather appealing. When all had left, Ephenia came forward and put her arms around Dane's waist.
The Order of Aurora. I like it.
She smiled.
Yes, but it won't be enough. There is still more we need to learn about the darkness if we are to fully understand how to defeat it,
Dane said with a serious tone as he watched the other 5 leave, hoping for a brighter future.
When your fires all die out, all you know just turns to ash, and your life goes slipping, spinning into doubt. Sunshine trapped inside your heart, cold and lost and in the dark. Looking back on all this, nobody was there. Nothing left to lose. Gotta find the you that's hidden deep